Now we turn to the book. The book, Penguin edition, that collects the Colombian stories of the voyages. The first one, the most important one, the one that brings him to the New World in 1492, is based on a log that he kept. So if we read this edition, we get to hear his recounting of what was happening day by day, each day. What is happening? Where are they? How many days have they traveled? Here's from Cohen's introduction, just a few little things that you can see later. One of the things that you probably all know is that the actual text of the journal is not in our hands. We don't have the copy of it. The four voyagers discovered the New World, recorded a number of letters and dispatches. Story was taken up by a talented writer of newsletters, Peter Martyr, and then later by the historian Oviedo, and finally by Bartolomé de las Casas. Both of them knew the Indies and Columbus's son, and so he has directed the great library of documents collected in the Casa de las Indias in Sevilla, and afterwards taken. In addition, Hernando himself had many papers which were read also by de las Casas, and so it's de las Casas who's really going to give us the complete version of the actual log of the Colombian voyages. And here's just a little bit about Oviedo and how he writes it down, and then later information about Columbus when he gets there and what he finds. We'll come back to that in a second. And then the actual digest. So in other words, we have two or three different sources for the log that we have here in the Cohen translation. And it's various versions of the whole log, and we've had to piece it together. So lots of critics, have a criticism of the exact text, which is better, which isn't. Cohen takes that all up in his introduction. So I think that the log is very good. It's probably accurate for most of the text, and let's just look at it now together. So here's just a mention of him before Ferdinand and Isabella, and then here is a little bit of background. In Granada, I departed May 12th, went to the seaport of Palos. Now Palos is very important in this story because Palos is the city on the Atlantic coast near the mouth of the Guadalquivir River from Sevilla. So it was the most convenient port to put all this together. And the citizens of Palos are still very, very proud of the Pinzon family who were on the ships, because the citizens of Palos still think that the Pinzon brothers were more important than Columbus. So it's quite interesting to encounter all this. If you go to Palos, you hear all about the Pinzon brothers. So he prepared the ships in Palos. In other words, they were building them. In addition to that, they had to equip the ships with specific equipment, and that equipment was put together by a Florentine company, the Bernardi company from Florence. So not only was the research behind the trip Florentine, but also the real key provisioners were Florentine companies who knew what to do. Bernardi was the key one. So August 3rd, I departed on a course for the Canary Islands, from which possession of your highnesses, that means Isabella, intended to set out and sail. So the launch off was going to be the Canary Islands. And where are, first of all, here's Palos. Here's a nice little map showing you exactly where Palos is. And as you can see, it's in that little inlet there. The Portuguese coast is just to the left, the little inlet to the Guadalquivir River estuary and opening, and that's Palos. It sits right next to it. And so that's where he was going to start his trip. And then The next step, of course, was going to be the Canaries. And if you look at this map, you can see where they are down the coast, down from Spain and Portugal, down along the coast of Africa, and just a little bit out from the coast of Africa. A lot of African refugee immigrants now can get themselves out to the Canaries in boats that they're rowing or using sails. So there's a huge migration that comes to the Canary Islands. But there you can see on the map, there's the Canaries, and it had a huge advantage of being in the direction of the winds that would take them across the Atlantic, that is, winds coming from the east to the west, and carry them exactly where they wanted to go. So they're going to go out through and keep going west. So they're going to stop at the Canaries, and here's his account of just these few days in the Canaries where they have to stop to provision their ship. And they'd had trouble with one of the ships, and so they're going to need to stop and work on the ship. We continued south by southwest, so they're going south, right, towards the rudder of the Pinta, and there's the Pinzon. Martin Pinzon jumped out of position, so they had to fix the ship. The pilots of the caravel differed as to their position. Finally, on 9th of August, the admiral. Now, the reference to Columbus will be both first person and third person because it depends on what section you're taking, whether you're taking it from De las Casas or someplace else. So that's why you'll see both first and third. Admiral could not make Gomera. Gomera was one of the important cities of the Canaries, and so this just recounts how they worked. There's a picture of Gomera, one of the islands in the Canaries. It's rugged, but then it has some beautiful beaches, big, wide bays and beaches, and so the Canary Islands are a very, very big tourist spot for Europeans. Huge airplanes land at Tenerife, and then people spend a week or two. So here's your timing for the whole thing: the month of September to October 12th. So roughly 5 weeks. 5 weeks of constant travel. So they set out that morning from the harbor of Gomera, set course to continue the voyage. He learned from the caravel, which came from the island of Hierro, that 3 Portuguese caravels were cruising there. 7th of September, it was calm. 8th of September, 3 o'clock in the morning, began to blow. 9th of September, the ship made 15 leagues that day and decided to score up smaller mounts so the crews should not take fright. So here's Columbus's strategy. As he makes the trip, he quickly decides cut back on the amount he's recording for the public knowledge and let them think they haven't gone quite that far. He's going to shave off so that as it goes further than they expected, the crew won't get hysterical. Monday, 10th of September, that day and night we went 60 leagues, 10 miles an hour, but he reckoned only 48 leagues so as not to alarm the crew. So he's going to shave off little as they go. September 11th, that day they sailed on their course westward, made more than 20 leagues, saw a large fragment of a mast of a 120-tonner, and 17th, continued his course westward for 50 leagues, a huge journey that day. Now, if you read the log, you realize it's a pretty easy trip. The sun is shining, the men can lay around the deck and enjoy, and soon they're going to start seeing lots of greenery and weed coming from the Americas. And so really the trip over is relatively easy. They're sailing with the winds, and so once they get the sails up and they get the sun, they have a pretty good day. So here they go 50 leagues in one day. They were helped by the current. They saw much weed. They decided that they were near the land. The pilots took and marked the north and found that the needles were declined a full point. The sailors were frightened and depressed and did not say why. On observing this, the admiral gave orders that they should take the north again at dawn. The cause of this was that the star apparently changed its position, that the Monday, he's talking about the compasses, that Monday morning they saw much more weed, which was like the weed from rivers, and they found live crab. So, of course, the men are watching every single detail as they go on. Now they're in the 18th, So now they've been going 11, 12 days. If you add the Canaries, it's 14 days. During that day and night, they made more than 55 leagues, even more, but he only reckoned 48, so he's cutting off 7, 8 leagues every day. On these days, the sea was smooth as the river at Seville. That day, Alonso sailed ahead in the Pinta, which was a fast ship because, as he called to the admiral from his ship, he had seen a great flock of birds flying westward. On the 19th, the admiral continued on his course, and since it was calm, made 25 leagues, but reckoned only 22. At 10 o'clock that morning, a booby, that's a certain kind of bird, and the ship in the evening they saw another. These birds are not accustomed to fly more than 20 leagues from land, so they figured they must be within 20 leagues. Little rain fell, which is a certain sign of land. The admiral didn't wish to stop and beat to windward in order to keep going. On the 20th, this day he sailed west by northwest, made 7 or 8 leagues. So this is the wind has gone down. So now they can't go as fast. On the 21st, day was calm. There was some wind later, so again they're not making too much. On the 22nd, they sailed northwest, more or less veering a little to one side or the other, making roughly 30 leagues. That's pretty good. On the 23rd, steered northwest, and on the 25th, much of this day was calm, but later there was wind, and they followed their western course until night. And the admiral had a conversation with Martin Alonso about a chart which Columbus had sent 3 days before over to Alonso on his caravel, on which were drawn certain islands supposed to be in this area. Alonso said that they must be somewhere near them. The admiral replied that he was of the same opinion. The reason why they had not reached them must be that the currents had driven the ships northeastward, and they had not gone as far as Pilot said. Having reached this conclusion, the admiral asked them to return. So, in other words, they're now hitting these puzzles as to they think where they know where they are, but of course they're really not where they think they are, according to the maps. Because their knowledge of the size of the globe is wrong. It's way bigger than they thought. September 22nd, he followed his course westward till midday. 27th, he continued on his westward course that day, May 21. Now, the men are really complaining, becoming really difficult. October 1st, now you realize we're 10 days away from the discovery. He kept on his westward course. He made 25 leagues. On the 2nd of October, followed his course, made 39 leagues. On the 3rd, he followed his usual course and made 47. So now they're having very, very good days. On the 7th, he continued westward up to an hour after sunrise. He went 23 leagues, but told the men only 18 because the men are getting more and more restless. All the ships sailed at the utmost speed in order to be the first to sight land. So they all have these ideas now that they've seen something from land. It's wrong, but they're driven forward. 11th of October, they sailed southwest. They ran into rougher seas than any they had met on the whole voyage. They saw petrels and green reed near the ship. The men of the Pinta saw a cane and a stick, picked up another small stick, apparently shaped with an iron tool, also a piece of cane, some land grasses, small board. Those on the caravel Nina saw other indications of land and a stick covered with barnacles. At these signs, all breathed again and were rejoiced. Everybody on the ship now is just wild with ecstasy, just so excited. That day they went 27 leagues before sunset, and after sunset he resumed his original western course, and they made 12 more up to 2 hours before midnight, and had gone 90 miles, which are 22 leagues and a half, and the caravel Pinta, being swifter and sailing ahead of the admiral, now sighted land and gave the signals which the admiral had commanded. The first man to sight land was a sailor called Rodrigo from Triana, who afterwards claimed the reward, which was pocketed by the admiral, presumably. The admiral, however, went on the stern castle at 10 o'clock in the night, had seen a light, though it was so indistinct he would not affirm that it was land, and he called Peter Gutierrez from the king's table, told him that there seemed to be a light, and asked him to look, and he did so and saw it. And he said the same to Rodrigo of Segovia, whom the king and the queen had sent on the fleet, and he saw nothing. But now it's October 12th. They're awake all night, of course. And after the admiral spoke, light was seen once or twice. It was like a wax candle. It went up and down, and very few thought this was a sign of land. But the admiral was certain
Accordingly, after the recitation of the Salve, one of the Catholic masses in the usual manner by the assembled sailors, the admiral most seriously urged them to keep a good lookout for the forecastle, watch carefully, promised money. So this is on Friday now, October 12th, which they reached a small island called Gina. Immediately some naked people appeared. The admiral went ashore in the armed boat, as did Martin Alonso Pinzon and his brother and Captain Lee. And the admiral raised the royal standard, and the captains carried 2 banners with the green cross, which were flown by the admiral on all his ships. So there it is. There's the painting of them coming aboard and putting their stuff on the beach, on the sea, and that's the moment. And so he raised the royal standard. On each side of the cross was a crown surmounting the letters for Ferdinand and Isabella. And on landing they saw very green trees and much water and fruit of various kinds. The admiral called the 2 captains and the others who had landed, recorded the whole fleet, and so he took possession of the island in the name of the king and the queen. He made other declarations, so these were all the legal claims that, of course, would be part of... And then he begins to describe the people they found. They gave them things. The things pleased them greatly, and they became marvelously friendly. And they afterwards swam out to the ship's boats in which we were sitting, bringing us parrots and balls of cotton thread and spears and other things which they exchanged, willingly traded everything they had. But they seemed to me a people very short of everything. They all go naked, as their mothers bore them, including the women, although I saw only one very young girl. All the men I saw were young. I did not see one over the age of 30. They were very well built, with fine bodies and handsome faces. Their hair is coarse, almost like that of a horse's tail, and short. They wear it down over their eyebrows, except for a few strands at the back, which they wear long and never cut. They're the color of the Canary Islanders. Some of them paint themselves black. They do not carry arms or know them, for when I showed them swords, they took them by the edge and cut themselves. They have no iron. Their spears are made of cane, some instead of an iron tip. They are fairly tall on the whole. And now he begins to give more information about the people on the ship, the size of it, and then, of course, they're going to continue their explorations around the various other islands, Dominican Republic, Haiti. All of this is part of this moment in the exploration.